William is next. Hey, William, what's going on, man? Thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Brian, how are you?
Good. What's on your mind, William?
Not too much. I originally was going to call to compare handling this situation, Trump versus Kamala. And I was just wondering what your opinion is, not getting into it, but as it sits now.
Well, Kamala wouldn't have gotten us into this war. I think it's pretty
Right, we agree on that.
pretty obvious there. She did not bow down to Benjamin Netanyahu, okay, while she always said, and I agreed with her, like Joe Biden, that Israel has the right to defend itself. We would do the same. She also didn't bow down to the Israeli government, and I appreciate that about her. You shouldn't bow down to any government. She would not have gotten us into this war. I also believe she would have not coddled to Vladimir Putin. As we know, the war in Ukraine is worse off now than it was on day one. So when it comes to foreign policy and foreign affairs, I can tell you right now, you wouldn't have had somebody in Harris's administration saying that we have no reason to believe that, you know, Iran is furthering their nuclear capabilities. And then 2 months later, Kamala Harris saying, well, this person is completely wrong. That's exactly what Donald Trump has done. Why hasn't he fired her then? Why hasn't he fired Tulsi Gabbard if she doesn't know what she's talking about? By the way, I believe Tulsi Gabbard was being honest, and that's why she wasn't invited to any of these national security meetings over the last week. She was telling the truth. Donald Trump is listening to the Israeli government over our own intelligence, and that has to concern you.
But I guess I wanted to tell the man who did the 3 tours in Iraq or whatever that I have very, very much respect for him.
What would you say to Donald Trump right now? I would assume, William, you're somebody who has voted and supports Donald Trump. Do you think he's handling this situation correctly?
I think it's out of control, to be honest.
Do you regret your vote?
I will never do that, Brad. You know me.
Well, what do you mean by never? What would it take?
I will never regret voting for Donald Trump.
What would it take for you? What would it take for you to say, geez, you know what? Maybe I made a mistake. If he starts 6 ill-advised wars, I mean, is there any bar where you say to yourself, okay, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have voted for Donald Trump. Is there anything he can do that would change your mind and say, geez, I made a mistake?
Your point is lesser of 2 evils. I would never trust Kamala Harris.
Why is she evil?
I didn't say evil. I would never trust.
Well, but you said the lesser of 2 evils, which would lead me to believe that you're saying you're voting for one of 2 evils. So what is evil? What is evil about Kamala Harris? You could disagree with her policies, but what would be evil about a woman who got her college degree, who worked hard in school, passed the bar, became an attorney general, became a sitting senator, is a loving mother, is a loving wife? What is it about Kamala Harris? I can give you many reasons why I think Donald Trump is an evil man for a lot of different reasons.
No, I'm not saying she's evil, Brian. I'm saying the lesser of 2 evil is a statement that one is worse than the other.
Okay, so what makes Kamala Harris worse?
I'm not sure she could deal with all the situations that are going on right now.
You just told me you didn't like what Donald Trump is dealing with, the situation with Iran, and you just admitted, which, by the way, we agree, that Kamala would not have gotten us into this war. So I'm trying to understand, what do you mean she wouldn't have been able to deal with this? She would have made the right decision. We both agree on that. She wouldn't have gotten us into this war in the first place. Isn't that a direct correlation on the bad judgment of the man that you voted for?
Right, but to vote for somebody just because they wouldn't do something that you didn't know was going to happen in the future, that's a stretch.
Right, but you're still saying you don't regret your vote and you already know what happened. That's the part that confuses me.
No, I just never thought she was qualified to be president of the United States.
And Donald Trump is. Okay, so let's go with that for a minute. Hold on, William, I want to dissect. This is important. So you don't believe a woman who was a 2-time elected attorney general, someone who was elected as a senator and was a vice president, is not qualified to be president, yet the guy that you voted for is somebody who was a reality TV star and a failed businessman. Explain to me how Kamala Harris is not qualified, but in your estimation, Donald Trump is.
You left off Donald Trump was president of the United States for 4 years, correct?
Okay, right, but I would say he did a horrendous job as president. What made him qualified the first go around? Did you vote for him the first go around?
Yes.
Okay, so what made him qualified?
Change.
Yeah, but that's your
We need-
opinion.
we
That's
need
not a
to
qualification.
change.
If I went up and did a job interview and they asked what your qualifications were, and I said, I want change, that's my qualifications, you would laugh in my face. Change isn't a qualification. It's not something you put on a resume. What in Donald Trump's resume, in your estimation, William, made him qualified to even run for president, let alone be the president?
The first or either time.
Either time.
The first time he was a necessary evil, and I'll use the word evil, for change.
Right, but
What was
that's not a
happening-
qualification, though, William. What was the I gave you qualifications under Kamala Harris. What qualified him?
The qualification for Donald Trump, despite knowing how to use the bankruptcy rules and the tax code because of his wealth to his benefit, I think he was a little sharper financially than Kamala.
So being a convicted felon and breaking the law makes you qualified to be president, because we know he inflated that and he broke the law. He's also a 34-count felon. We know that he did that with some of his businesses. So because you break the law and you break tax codes, that makes you more qualified than a woman who's never been accused of a crime in her entire life?
And I think this was the first election ever where people didn't want anything to do with Joe Biden.
Okay, well,
I agree with that statement.
I disagree with that, because Joe Biden.
They had enough.
Well, I disagree. I think a lot of people didn't vote, and people didn't want to vote for a woman. I don't think this had much of anything to do with Joe Biden. But I find it interesting when you say you don't believe Kamala was qualified, yet you agree with me that he shouldn't have gotten us into this war. It was terrible judgment. You agree with me that this is a man. You haven't named me really any qualifications. Just because he wants change, that's a slogan. That's not a qualification. I don't believe it's a qualification when you break tax code and you break the law because you know how to manipulate a system. Just because you know how to manipulate a system doesn't mean that you should run for president. If somebody's on food stamps and welfare and they're manipulating the system, does that mean they're qualified to be a president of the United States? You would say, of course not. And I would agree with you. What is a qualification? Just give me one that Donald Trump had or has that you think makes him qualified to be the president.
Because I've told you many times on this show, 2 or 3, I believe, that no one person is qualified to be president of the United States anymore. Not one person. They don't have the qualification.
Okay, but that's a general statement. You said that you don't believe Kamala was qualified and you think Donald Trump was more qualified. And I'm just trying to come up with your reasoning behind that. And the only thing you came up with was, well, he cut some corners and he knew how to manipulate the IRS. That's not a qualification. That makes you a bad person. That's not a good qualification. That's a bad one. That means you manipulate the system. Why would that be? Give me a qualification. Give me something.
He had knowledge of international affairs. Would you disagree with that?
He had knowledge of international affairs. The man doesn't even know where certain countries are globally in the world in a map. He doesn't have third-grade geography skills, so I would respectfully disagree with you on that one. He doesn't have any foreign policy. What is his foreign policy? Coddling to evil, murderous dictators, writing love letters to Kim Jong-un, sending COVID test kits to Vladimir Putin in the middle of COVID? I mean, what is his foreign policy? I don't even know what it is.
You just explained how hard it is because Israel factors into everything here. You agree?
If you allow them to, I don't believe Kamala would have put that in there. I don't believe Kamala would have gone to war with Iran. You know why? Because I don't believe that she would have allowed Benjamin Netanyahu. She would not have allowed Bibi to infiltrate her mind, for lack of a better term, in making a decision like this. Clearly, Donald Trump did. Don't you find that problematic? I thought this was America first.
It's a very complicated situation. You have to agree with that, correct?
Of course, it's a very complicated situation, but we shouldn't rely. It's something that we've had to deal with for decades and decades and decades, and something Israel's had to deal with is the what's going on in the Middle East. But that doesn't mean we get involved. And now all of a sudden, I believe Donald Trump knows he made a mistake. And now he's saying, okay, we want the war to end now. We want peace. That's not how this works. Don't you think that's naive and it's incompetent for Donald Trump to actually believe that all of a sudden Iran is going to raise the white flag and say, okay, we're done now? That's not good.
Brian, I don't believe it's a full-on war. Do you?
So what would you call a country that bombs another country and then another country that attempts to bomb them back? What would you call that? What would you define that as?
I would say it was to get rid of something that could have threatened the stability of the
So what was World War I and World War II?
Oh, no, I'm just saying that if people ever shoot a nuclear warhead, it's over for all of us. We don't have to worry about it.
Okay, but again, I would ask you,
everybody will trade.
What would you call a country that bombs another country, which is what we did, and then that country
Correct.
responding by bombing some of our bases overseas? What would you call that then if it's not war?
Eliminating the threat and helping Israel.
So you could call any war attempting to eliminate a threat, couldn't you?
I'm not sure. I know nothing about war. I'm not going to lie, Brian.
Okay, well, I would tell you we were trying to eliminate a threat. We were told weapons of mass destruction. That was a war in Iraq. We can go back to George Sr. We were trying to eliminate a threat. That's basically every war back in time. One government is trying to eliminate a threat. To me, that's the definition of war. When you bomb a country, that is war. That's what it is. I mean, to me, that's the essence and definition of war, William, is it not?
It could have been the start of the war. It's just I don't watch TV the last day or so.
Okay.
And I don't think that and of course Congress, anytime we want to go to real war, they should have a vote.
Well, guess what? The guy that you voted for did not allow Congress to vote. Even George W. Bush allowed Congress to vote on the war in Iraq. Why do you think it is that Donald Trump went over Congress's head and did not allow them to do so?
Because he might have had a side deal with Israel.
There you go. You know what, William? We are onto something there. We are onto something. I agree with you there. And that is against our own Constitution. That is my point. I agree with you. He has defied our own Constitution, gone over the head of Congress, and made a deal with Israel. It is illegal what he has done, William. And we'll, I guess, why don't we leave it at that? We agree on that, William. And it's good to hear from you, and I appreciate the phone call.